Guess where I went today? By the way, it's February 9th. I got 3 books. Guess what? 2 of them are Haruki Murakami. This is the first novel he ever got published. It's 2 books in one. Hear the Wind Sing, Pinball 1973, and this is the first book in the series called The Rat, which includes A Wild Sheep Chase and Dance Dance Dance, which I read recently. And so I figure go back to the beginning, read what got him started, and just conclude the series. Then we've got The Elephant Vanishes, which honestly I was intrigued by the word elephant, and elephant is maybe it's my first favorite animal. I have a whole list, but for now we'll just say elephants on there. So that's why, but it's a book of short stories. And Elephant Vanishes is the last one in the collection. And then we have The Dreamers by Karen Thompson Walker. And I happened to walk by this book as I was walking in the store, saw the word Dreamers. Another thing, like my name is Sid the Dreamer, so yeah, anyway, so I flipped over the cover. It's about people who fall asleep and can't be woken up, and you're trying to figure out why they're sleeping, and not explaining this well because I don't feel like explaining what the book is about. But anyway, I started reading it and I started like zipping through it, and I read like the first 10 pages very quickly. And so also one of the main character is named May, M-E-I, and there's a character named May in Dance Dance Dance. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. It's not why I picked up the book, but it was definitely like, oh, that's cool, another May. So yeah. So those are the 3 books I bought today. But anyway, went to Barnes & Noble, was there for 5.5 hours. So the last video you saw, I talked about an antiheroes, which, means basically when something is kind of pushed to the brink of itself and then it becomes its opposite. I decided that instead of naming my essay collection an antiheroes or an antiherodrama or whatever, I'm going to name it Soul Dust. Which, like, okay, just to give you a bit of background on this name, I listened to a song called Cemeteries by a band called Sodus, S-O-D-U-S. And I was looking at it and I said it out loud and I'm like, oh, that sounds like the word soul dust. So it has really nothing to do with the song. I just thought the band's name sounded like the word soul dust. And then I was thinking about that and I was like, oh, okay, that sounds interesting. And this is like the actual working title, not Project Soul Dust or whatever. It's like what I'm actually calling it, because I feel like with this I don't really need to necessarily be vague because it's more about me and my life. So it's like, I can just tell you what it's called. But anyway, what soul dust means to me is like kind of like a dusting off of the soul. Like, let's get figurative here for a second. Follow me here. Sometimes it feels like the way that I live my life, it feels like my soul is kind of being unused, like it's stagnant kind of, if that makes sense, because I'm not living up to my full potential, or I'm ignoring or I'm doubting like my dreams and ambitions, or I'm doing things that don't necessarily get me closer to those dreams. And so it feels like I'm almost shunning my soul, if that makes sense. So like I'm a very kind of soul-y person in that I always do things by like my gut instinct and like how they make me feel. Like I'm very big on like feeling, and I make decisions, a lot of decisions based on like my instincts and whatnot. Even if it doesn't seem to make sense, but if my instincts are telling me to do something, then I usually try to do it. And every time I've ignored it, it has not worked out. And so if instincts are like my soul here, then sometimes it feels like I'm ignoring my instincts. I'm ignoring what my soul wants in life or just in general. And every time I start to doubt myself, it feels like the doubt is like the dust settling on my soul. Like the more that I doubt myself, the more dust settles on my soul. And the more difficult it becomes to kind of sense what it is that I want. You know what I mean? Like if I keep doubting what it is that I want, then it makes it hard for me to actually understand what it is that I want in life and for my future and everything like that. So maybe that made absolutely no sense to you, but it makes sense to me, and that's what matters. So that's soul dust for you. So basically I decided to divide up soul dust into 3 parts. I love to divide stories up into parts. So there's part 1, there's part 2, and there's part 3. So part 1, and get ready for some more words that you have probably never heard before and may not remember and may not be able to pronounce, because Lord knows I am still having trouble pronouncing them and spelling them. But I just like what the words mean. It's unfortunate that the words can be so complicated. But okay, so part 1 is acrasia. Now, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. I just had this thought like acrasia, gesundheit. Never mind. So acrasia Gesundheit basically means having a weakness of will, which is like acting against your better judgment. If this is a collection of essays all centered around kind of like similar themes, and there's like should be a progression where hopefully at the end of me writing all these essays, I have some sort of character growth, you know what I mean? And so Acrasia is basically more or less, I feel, where I am now, or at least where I was a few months ago, where I have this weakness of will. I'm acting against my better judgment, and you know, I gotta fix the way that I look at things, that I do things. I have to improve. I have to start acting toward my better judgment, and I have to start taking control of my life and making decisions that will get me to where I need to be. And then we have part 2, which is enantiodromia. And that's that's the word that you've heard before that of me talking about, and that's when something or someone is pushed to the extreme, so much so that they become the opposite of themselves. So in order for me to kind of understand what that means, I had to kind of like think of ways I see enantiodromia take place in my life or in real life. So like one example of this is like if you're on a plane and you're flying east, how far east are you flying until essentially you end up west of where you started? If you start here in California, eventually you fly far enough east that you end up west of where you started. Do you know what I mean? So like it goes so far east that it becomes the opposite of east, it becomes west. Or like overcompensation. So like a couple years ago or a year and a half ago or whatever, I put up a video about like the honeymoon phase and overcompensation, where basically in the video I was like, I had hit that point in my story 20 to 30,000 words in where like I was no longer in the honeymoon phase of this story. I was no longer super enthusiastic about this story because I had just hit a wall and didn't know what was going on. So because I didn't really feel super energized by writing, I started to overcompensate and become energized by something else, if that makes sense. So I started like getting really into cooking. So I feel like that's one example of enantiodromia, and this is a whole Greek thing. Like it started with Heraclitus. Maybe you've heard about him in your philosophy classes or something, but he was the one who kind of introduced this concept of enantiodromia. And then Carl Jung, which is a psychiatrist, you know, I think in the 1800s or something, he studied this with his patients, and he kind of, I guess, expanded on the concept of enantiodromia. I feel like somebody should give me $1 every time I say that word properly. And then we've got part 3, which is encrasia. But encrasia is kind of like the opposite. There's opposites again. Is like the opposite of acrasia. So you have acrasia and encrasia. Encrasia is the power over oneself. So once you have taken control of your life, once you are acting toward your better judgment. So these are the essays that I will write once I've come through to the other side, once I've started to take control of my life. Of course, there's the argument, you know, for like fate and stuff where, you know, you have no control over your life or whatever. But I choose to think that I have at least some element of control. And of course, there are things you can't control. But in terms of like going after my goals and aspirations, you know, they're obviously not going to be achieved if I don't do something to go after them, you know. And if I go after them and I've worked my hardest and, you know, I persevere, then I have done all I can do. And that's what I think encrasia will be about, is me doing all that I can do to get to the other side. I imagine that some of those essays are essays that I'm not yet ready to write, you know, like I still have some personal character development to do. And I think that once I have gotten on the path of that, you know, I will be able to write more of those essays. I do have one essay for encrasia that I wrote back in 2016 after my internship at the publishing company in New York. One thing about when I was there that summer is I never felt more like myself. And that's actually where I was when I started this YouTube channel. So if you look at my very first videos, a few of those are in New York. And I never felt more like myself than I did in those 2.5 months on a concrete island, which is the name of that essay, 2.5 months on a concrete island, where I am sitting at a cafe, not even a cafe, I'm sitting across from Madison Square Park, eating a sandwich, the sandwich that I described in my other video with mozzarella cheese, tomatoes, dripping with pesto and olive oil on flat, doughy, floury bread. I am literally eating this sandwich the entire essay, and as I am eating this essay, I am thinking about my life so far in New York and all the things that I have accomplished and all the things that I hope to accomplish in my remaining time through my internship there. And it's just a time in my life where I was very active. I was very kind of going after what I wanted to do, as opposed to like sitting back and letting things happen or letting nothing happen, you know. So that's definitely, I think, was one of my first steps towards encrasia, like being active in my own life. Think of a novel, you know, like the character is active, the character has a goal, they are going after it. So that was me being encrasia, or that was me, embodying the concept of Encratia. My brother gave me this hat for Christmas. So that's what I've got for you today. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'm so glad that this creative spirit has found me again, or that I have found it, you know, Encratia, right? Go after it with the club. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Give this video a like, hit subscribe, and I will see you next time. Toodaloo. Books. 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 Okay, we're done with that.